Holy and most wise God, we are grateful that we can indeed find safety in your arms. Storms of life will rage on. Waves will be high, the winds will be strong. But we are safe in your arms. God, we pray now that as we have shared together in these moments of worship, that you would indeed bless us now as we move to hear what your word has to say unto us on this day. Pray, God, that you would challenge us, that you would convict us, that you would empower us and encourage us to be the disciples you called us to be. Punish not your people for the frailty of your preacher. Use me in spite of me, so people would be edified. And you, God, would get all of the glory. It is the mighty and the matchless name, the one they call Jesus the Christ, Mary's baby and our Savior.
That's right.
We pray. And all God's children said amen, and amen. We praise God for our choir this morning who shared with us so powerfully. God has been able to work through them to bless us today. We pray now that the same Spirit will join us as we share to preach. Amen. Listen, I'm not a drummer. Just like to help out where I can. Praise God, the soloist is a drummer. Amen, amen. The text that grabs our attention this morning comes from Luke chapter 17. Luke chapter 17. Luke chapter 17. In verse 11. Luke chapter 17 will invite you to find it and mark it in your Bibles on your mobile device, tablet. Share with the Bible study crew that your pastor likes Apple products. And, y'all just pray. I'm over it now. The Lord has delivered me from having to upgrade every year when the new iPhone come out. The Lord has delivered me from that. But I'm an Apple product fan. So if you got your iPad or your iPhone with you, we invite you to stand. Luke chapter 17, beginning at verse 11. I invite you to stand and honor the God of the Word today. It'll be on the screen before you. We can read together from the screens. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." And when he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priest." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." Amen. May the word of God for the people of God. May be seated in the presence of God. Verse 15 says, one of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. I'd like to tag this particular text with the topic, guided by gratitude. Guided by gratitude. Discovered that teaching children to say thank you is hard work. We have to remind our sons that when somebody does something for them, gives them candy after service, we give them something that they desire at home, when they give each other things, when they're pressing them to share. And one of the key ways that we acknowledge what has been done is by saying thank you. And it dawned on me that we aren't naturally tuned to say thank you. In fact, we have to be taught how to express our gratitude. We aren't born into this world with a natural inclination to say thank you when we receive something. We take it as if it belongs to us, as if it's entitled to us. Because it's something that isn't innate for us to do, we forget how to say thanks. We can easily find ourselves into slipping into taking things for granted when we forget to say thank you. We have good health, good food, clothes, relationships, all of these things that we wake up every day and we can easily forget and think that we're supposed to have this stuff, that it's supposed to be a part of our existence, yet it's something that we don't deserve, it's something that we don't have to have, and so we ought to learn how to say thank you. Maybe it's because we have too much. We've been in this series of talking about open-handed living. As we reflected on a passage earlier in the book of Luke, Luke chapter 12, the parable of the rich farmer, the question arose, we ask God to help us when we find ourselves in lack. But why don't we ask God what we should do when we have too much? We live in a culture and in a season of history where the accumulation of stuff is the norm. Getting more is the order of the day. Instead of being grateful for what God has given us, knowing that we have enough and often more than enough to do what we need to do each and every day, we can find ourselves in this dangerous pursuit of more, which leaves us ungrateful for what we have, leaves us feeling entitled for what we should have, and unable to recognize the blessings of God around us unless they're big, bold moves of the Spirit. But I've discovered that saying thank you changes our perspective on what we have and what's been done for us. Instead of trying to get what we don't have, we start counting the blessings we already have. You know the song we've been singing all month, count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. I've discovered that if we spent time counting our blessings, that we wouldn't have time to focus on what we don't have, because we recognize all of the things that we do have. And because of all that God has done for us and all that God has given us and all that God has kept us through and kept us from, we ought to say thank you. And I believe this is the lesson of our text today, that there is power in saying thank you. It's not just good manners, but saying thank you is an expression of a heart of faith. And our text today begins with informing us of the geographic location of Jesus as he is traveling. He's traveling along the border between Samaria and Galilee, about to enter into a village, when he encounters 10 men who are lepers. More specifically, these 10 men weren't on the inside of the village gates, but they were on the outside of the village. Their leprosy was a type of skin disease that made them unclean according to Mosaic law, and because of this, they had to avoid human contact and stay clear from the regular living areas of people until they were deemed clean by the priest. Those with this skin disease were relegated to being beggars, living off of the goodwill of those who passed by. Well, what we find more intriguing about the text is that there were 10 of them together. All of them were outcasts. All of them were outsiders. All of them were defined by their disease and marginalized by their misery. And one of the greatest derailments of being able to say thank you in our lives is being overly indulged with our own issues. When we are defined by what our problems are, we only see the problems in our lives. We only see problems. When we only see problems, we begin to live out the old saying that misery loves company. Being bitter only attracts other bitter folks. Being angry only attracts other angry folks. Being cynical only attracts other cynics. Being negative only attracts negativity. Note in the text that there were 10 men who were together and they all had the same issue. Maybe the reason we can't grow past where we are is because we are in a place with folks who have turned their issues into their identities. There are some things that we have to live with, but living with them doesn't mean being defined by them. You are more than your problem. You are more than your dysfunction. You are more than your mistake. You are more than your sin. And that's why I like how Luke describes these men in the text. He doesn't call them lepers. He calls them men who had leprosy. That's a big difference, because if to call them lepers means that that's who they were as a person, but they are men that are dealing with an issue. He doesn't define them by their problem, but by their personhood. And when you stop defining yourself by your problem, you can find some hope like these brothers in the text did. Text says Jesus they met Jesus, and from a distance they called out to him in a loud voice, saying, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." This is the only place in Luke's gospel that the title Master is used by anyone other than the disciples. These 10 brothers outside of the gates to this village saw something in or heard something about Jesus that compelled them to call him out. Now, perhaps this was a little flattery in order to get maybe an extra piece of change in their cups, but the scholars would suggest that by this point in Jesus' ministry, his reputation would have preceded him. They knew who Jesus was. They knew what Jesus could do. And these brothers who had been distanced by their disease were now shouting to Jesus their desire for deliverance. Jesus saw them and commanded them to go and show themselves to the priest. And the text says that as they went, they were cleansed. These lepers had been given a direct command by Jesus to make a move. And if we had more time today, I would tell you that sometimes our deliverance doesn't come until we learn to move. These 10 men had been hanging out in the same place on the outside of the city. They shared in the misery of their malady, but when they see Jesus, he doesn't proclaim their healing, he gives them instructions. Could it be that Jesus wanted to see if they would take him at his word? Going to show themselves to the priest implies that they were going to be cleared to return to their communities disease-free. Yet Jesus doesn't say to them, "You are healed." He tells them to take action as if they are already healed, and healing will come as they are obedient to the command that he had given them. And perhaps that's what the Lord is teaching us in this moment. The way my pastor says it, he says that as we walk, God works. And as God works, we should be walking. We can't sit back and expect for God to do all the work for us. We have to be willing to do our part. If you want to escape the place of despair, if you need deliverance, if you're seeking healing, if you desire wholeness, I hear the Lord saying to you today, you've got to make a move, because while you do what you can, God will do what you can't do. So stop throwing your pity party. Stop the self-serving attention-seeking. Stop focusing on the dysfunction and the brokenness, and listen to the voice of the God saying, your healing isn't here. You've got to move. This is a regular miracle story that we find in the text today, in the pattern of the miracle stories of the gospel. But in verse 15, the text takes a turn, because one of the men, as he was on the move to see the priest, saw that he was healed. And instead of continuing his journey to the priest, he turns around and comes back glorifying God and thanking Jesus for what he had done. The kicker was that out of the 10 men, we don't know if they were all Jewish or all Samaritan or whatever the case was, but this was a Samaritan. Y'all know who Samaritans were. Samaritans were outside of the Jewish family of God because of their mixed lineage. They were Gentiles who had some Jewish in their blood and in their background, but they weren't considered a part of the tribal heritage of the nation of Israel. He was a Samaritan who had leprosy, but now was healed from his disease, and he's the one that came back to tell Jesus, thank you. There were 10 men who called out in a unified voice for Jesus to have pity on them in verse 13. There were 10 men who Jesus told to go see the priest, but in verses 15 and 16, there was only this one man who returned to say, thank you. We see it in the text, and Jesus noticed it as well. He asked the question, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give God praise except for this foreigner? We don't know whether the other 9 were Jews or Samaritans, but it's very likely it was a mixed crew. We don't know if they realized what happened to them until they got to the priest. All we know is that it was a Samaritan man who discovered his skin disease and came back and had been healed. He came back to Jesus because he had been healed, and he wanted to tell Jesus, thank you. Jesus' questions to the one who returned should be unsettling for us who are in the family of God. Because so often we talk so much about God's blessings and have an underlying expectation and even, I dare say, entitlement to these things that we consider blessed, that we can take the blessings of God for granted. This is an indictment of sorts for us who find ourselves doing more griping than showing gratitude. It's an easy trap for us to fall into if we don't guard our hearts and our spirits with a disposition of gratefulness. Not just thinking about it, but actually living it. Not just singing about it, but expressing it in our actions towards God and others. Not just being reminded about it as a way for the worship leader or the preacher to pump us up, but actually practicing gratitude in our everyday lives. And when we spend our time expressing gratitude, we won't have time to complain. If our mouths are filled with the language of thankfulness for what we do have, we don't have much time to talk about what we don't have. In other words, we have so much to thank God for that we don't have to wait until Sunday at 10 a.m. to gather in this place and tell God thank you. We should be telling God thank you each and every moment of our lives. And that's the story of the one who came back. That's the story of the one who came back. Something about what had been done for him prompted him to come back to Jesus when he discovered his healing. He just wanted to say thank you. So then what does this one man's actions teach us about what it means to be guided by gratitude? The first thing is that when we guided by gratitude, we recognize and notice that gratitude develops from recognition. Gratitude develops from recognition. Notice in the text, in verse 15, it says, when he saw, he was healed. When he saw, he was healed. The idea of seeing that is captured in the Greek word that translated to mean saw in this verse is one of bridging physical sight with mental understanding. It's moving from seeing to knowing. In the sense of a phrase that we use all the time, I see what you're saying. Yes, the man saw that his skin was once riddled with disease was now clear, and that led to a deeper understanding of what had taken place. There were 3 things that were clear for this brother. He was healed, he knew who did it, and he didn't deserve it. The healing of the man with leprosy is pretty straightforward in the text. 1 minute, the disease was there. The next minute, the disease was gone. The power of God had moved through Jesus and transform this man's situation. But we would do well this morning to remember that this began with a request from the man who had leprosy. He asked Jesus to do something for him, and Jesus responded to his request. And perhaps it would be helpful for us to recognize the responses that God has given to our request. Many times we celebrate the responses that are exactly what we want. We ask God for healing and God does it. We ask God for resource and God provides. We ask God for opportunity and God opens doors. But let us not forget that sometimes God responds in ways that aren't always aligned with what we want. And we should be just as grateful for the no and the not yet as we are for the yes, because God is not a genie that does whatever we want to do, but God is a loving Father that gives us what we need. We ought to recognize that and be grateful, because when God doesn't say yes, it's because God is protecting us, God is keeping us, and God is preparing us for something greater. We can tell God thank you because we know that when God responds to our request, God is doing what God knows is best for us. As the man is walking to the temple to see the priest, he knows that the healing came because of Jesus. He recognized the source of his healing. And as much as we would like to think that we pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, or that we figured out a way by our own intelligence, the truth is that the deliverance we experience, the healing we benefit from, the transformation of our lives comes from partnership with God's power with our practiced obedience. Remember, Jesus responded to their request and gave them a command to go to the priest and heal them as they went. The walking was the faith-filled act of obedience that activated the healing power of God in their lives. They would have been foolish for Jesus to tell them to go to the priest and to stay standing right outside that village when Jesus is the one that told them to go. When we recognize that it was not by our power or our might, but it was the Spirit of the Lord that has fixed our brokenness, healed our dysfunction, and restored our wretchedness, it should move us to a posture and a place of gratitude and gratefulness. The third thing that he recognized is that he didn't deserve it. Note in the text the request of the men who had leprosy. They said, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. Have pity on us. The word pity means to have mercy upon and show compassion towards something or someone. The issue the men dealt with may not have been their fault, but it was up to Jesus to decide how he would respond to them. He didn't have to do it. He didn't have to address their issues. He didn't have to tell them to go to the priest. He didn't have to heal their body, but he did it anyway. The reality is that we serve a God who has shown us divine mercy time and time again. God didn't have to see us through the things that we've been through. God doesn't have to respond to our midnight tears. God doesn't have to listen to our prayers of desperation. God doesn't have to do anything that God doesn't want to do, particularly for folks who don't get it right all of the time. But I'm so glad, y'all, that we serve a God who's faithful even when we are faithless. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. God's mercy is new every morning. We don't deserve it, we didn't earn it, and we ought to recognize it and tell God, thank you. Gratitude develops from recognition, but also, this morning, gratitude results in redirection. Gratitude results in redirection. Verse 15 says one of them, when he saw he was healed, came back. There were 10 men that were healed, but only one came back to Jesus to say thank you. The others kept on their way to the temple, being obedient, doing what the Lord commanded them to do. They were responding to the word of Jesus and filled with the hope of being able to return to their lives in their communities. They've been separated from their families and friends. They weren't able to work and were excited to get back to life as normal. They rushed to the temple to get checked out and cleared so they could reintegrate into society. But this one man who was headed to the temple with them saw he was healed, and his gratitude changed his direction. May I suggest to us today that gratitude should cause us to do things differently? The 9 who didn't return wanted to get back to the lives they left, but the one who came back shows us that life changes for us when we are guided by gratitude. The one who returned did is no small thing. With the prospect of returning to his old life and reach what he'd been praying for and crying for and asking God to do for him right there in his grasp, he turns back from returning to what was normal in order to glorify God and tell Jesus thank you. He prioritized thanking Jesus above everything else. He put Jesus first, and that's what gratitude does for us. It keeps us focused where it matters the most. When we start taking things for granted, it's a sign that things that are extraordinary have become ordinary to us. It's extraordinary that we are still here today. It's extraordinary about the fact that we're even alive today after all the stuff we've done, the places we've been, the folks we hung out with. It's amazing that we're still living today. It's amazing that we have the job that we do. If we look at our resume, we know we're not supposed to be sitting where we're sitting in the office where we are. After all the things that we have been through in our lives, after all the things we've been through this year, this week, even today, we should be grateful because it easily could have been the other way. And we haven't done anything to deserve the blessings that have come our way. I know you went to school. I know you worked hard. I know you did your best. But as the psalmist says, he said, if it had not been for the Lord who was on your side, none of that stuff would matter. None of that stuff would take you anywhere. But it's because of God's mercy. It's because of God's favor. It's because of God's grace. It's because of God's loving kindness that we have anything that we do have. And that's why we should say thank you. Notice what the man does in verse 16. He throws himself at Jesus' feet and thanks him. The one who was in the group that was worrying about how they would get their next meal. One that was in the group who was worrying about how if they would ever be clean again, and ever be reintegrated into society. One who was in the group who was worried he would never see his family again, never be able to work again, was now worshiping at the feet of Jesus. He came back to thank Jesus. He was grateful for what had been done, and he kneels at the feet of the one who did it for him. And I just believe that when we tell God thank you, we are redirected to beyond what we've been given to the one who gave it to us. We start to be redirected and refocused on the giver of every good and perfect gift. Saying thank you shifts the direction of our thoughts and our minds and our actions. Y'all, we ought not be able to help but to come back and be able to say thank you. We can't help but give God glory when we think about all that God has done for us. We can't help but to give God the praise. In fact, the person that is guided by gratitude can't help but to begin to do things differently. Because when you are grateful, you start acting grateful. You start speaking grateful. You start giving grateful. You start living grateful. Gratefulness should change the way you live your life. When you say thank you, it changes the way that you begin to live, but it also changes the way you begin to see things. You start looking at burdens, but you realize they're really blessings. You start looking at obstacles and recognizing that they're really opportunities for God to do something else amazing. You start looking at challenges and recognizing that it's a chance, another chance for God to show God's wonderful power one more time. Saying thank you changes us. Saying thank you changes us. Develops from recognition. It results in redirection, and gratitude finally increases our capacity to receive. Increases our capacity to receive. Watch the text. Jesus poses his questions in verse 17 and 18. And then he tells the man who returned in verse 19, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. What is interesting is that the one who had been healed had no intention on receiving anything. He came back solely to give. Y'all see what the text says? He came back giving God praise in a loud voice. He came back to give thanks to Jesus for what he had done. He had already received more than he imagined in getting his healing from Jesus, but the text tells us that his gratefulness, a grateful return led him to receiving something more. Jesus tells the man that his faith has made him well. His faith was expressed by following the instructions that Jesus gave, and gave the whole group to go and show themselves to the priest. But the one who returned showed another dimension of faith in his recognition that God through Jesus had healed him, and in his action to return and rest at Jesus' feet in thanksgiving. Y'all, he didn't just take the healing and run, but he came back to acknowledge his gratitude to the one who was the source of his healing. And Jesus proclaims that he has been made well. Now this messes with me in the text because we've already seen the leper already knows, the man who had leprosy already knows that he has been healed. We see in verse 17 and 18 that Jesus asked the question, were not there 10 men who were clean? Why were the other 9? But Jesus in verse 19 says, your faith has made you well. Why would Jesus need to reiterate the fact that the man was already healed? Well, we must consider the idea that the one that was made well goes deeper than just physical healing. The Greek word that's translated to mean made well in the text is the same word that's used for physical healing and the same word that's used for salvation. Meaning not only did this man get physically healed, but he received salvation when he returned back to the feet of Jesus. And y'all, that's good news for us this morning. Because when we say thank you and are in a posture of gratitude, it opens up the opportunity for God to keep on blessing us over and over again, over and above anything that we have asked for. Saying thank you tells God that we know that we know God is our deliverer, that we know God is our protector, that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we can ask, think, or imagine according to the power at work within us. Saying thank you gets us more than we ever imagined. Saying thank you gives God a chance to blow our minds one more time. The leper never thought he would be healed. You never thought you would get out that bad relationship. You never thought you would have money to be able to do what you wanted to do. You never thought you would make it to see another Thanksgiving. You never thought you would be healed from your disease. But when you told God, thank you for letting me see another day, it opened up the opportunity for God to do some amazing things in your life. Saying thank you lets God know that we are grateful for all that God has done for us. And y'all, God's already done enough for us to say thank you. In fact, if we had 10,000 tongues, it wouldn't be enough to tell God thank you. God woke us up this morning. God gave us a reasonable portion of health and strength. I'm going to just run the roll real quick and remind you. God gave you somewhat activity of your limbs. God woke you up in your right mind. Nobody's sitting here naked today. You got clothes on your back and some clothes in your closet. I hope you didn't come hungry today. If you did, come see me after we try to get you straight. But I believe a bunch of us got a whole lot of food in our house. It might not be what we want to eat, but it's something to eat to keep us going a little while longer. We got a little change in our bank accounts, a little money saved up to go do some shopping this week for our Thanksgiving dinner and buy our kids and our grandkids some Christmas presents. All I'm saying is God has already done enough for us. But no, I came to tell you today that God has done enough, but God still wants to do more. God wants to do more. We just have to learn how to say thank you, because there's no limit to what God can do in the life of a person who is grateful for what they have. And he proved that when he sent his son to die for us, that we might be saved, and raised his son that we might have the power to live. And y'all, God has already done enough by sending us Jesus, but he wants to do more by letting the revelation of Jesus show up in our everyday lives, letting us walk in the power that he has given us through Jesus Christ. He's already done enough, y'all. But we ought to celebrate and tell God thank you, because gratitude opens up the capacity to receive what else God has for us, not for us to hold on to it or to hoard it or to keep it for ourselves, but so we can be a blessing to somebody else, so that we can help somebody else see Jesus for themselves. We ought to tell God thank you, because God has done so much for us. God has kept us. God has kept us through dangers seen and unseen. God has made ways out of no ways. God has opened doors that no man can shut and closed doors that no man can open. God has protected us. He's delivered us. He provided for us. God has healed our bodies. And that's why we ought to enter into his gates with thanksgiving. That's why we ought to come on in his courts with praise. That's why we should bless the Lord at all times, and let his praise be continually in our mouth. That's why our souls should make boast in the Lord, that the humble would hear thereof and be glad. That's why we ought to invite some folks, and I'm inviting you to do it right now. Magnify the Lord with me. Tell God thank you. Tell God thank you for keeping me for another day. Thank you for keeping me through another week. Thank you for keeping me through another year. Thank you, God. Thank you. We got to live our lives guided. Look, life's not perfect for any of us. From pulpit to the parking lot. We ain't really got a parking lot, street curb. Life's not perfect for any of us. We all got stuff we struggling with and we dealing with. We all got stuff we need. We all got places we need God to show up and do some stuff for us. We all are the men with leprosy in the text. They got an issue that we need God to handle. But we got to tell God thank you, so that God can start working some stuff out on our behalf. And do it what God needs. We just got to be guided by gratitude. Tell God thank you for what you have. And God will start taking care of those things in those places that you thought would never get fixed. Start making some ways for you. Start opening some doors. I could probably pass the mic today and say I just focused on doing what the Lord told me to do, and just being grateful unto God. And God gave me the job that I needed so I could provide for my family. I wasn't expecting it, but somebody called me from an application I put in 2 years ago. They called me and said, hey, look, we want to bring you in, and you just right at the time when you needed it. Right at the time when you were looking for it. Somebody got the doctor, you thought the doctor's prognosis was terminal. But you went back to the doctor and you just said, I'm not going to let this thing get me down, I'm going to pray. And you went back to the doctor said, oh, well, never mind. God turned that thing around. I'm saying we got to live with gratitude. Regardless of what is going on in our lives, we got to be thankful. So I invite you just for a few seconds, just all over the building, that you would close your eyes with me. And just think about all that you had to be thankful for. I tried to run the role of what it could be. But the truth is, I don't know everybody's story in here. You know your story. You know where God has brought you from. You know what you're dealing with right now. But just begin to think about all of the things that you can thank God for. And I dare you today to do as the leper did, as the man who was healed from leprosy rather did. And the text says that he came running unto Jesus, glorifying God in a loud voice. I dare you to glorify God for what God has done for you. I dare you to begin, as you think, to praise God and to lift him up. You give him a shout of praise today. Grateful for the things that you have done. Yes, I'm grateful for the victories you won. I could go on and on about your words, because I'm grateful, grateful, so grateful just to praise you, Lord. Flowing from my heart are the issues of is gratefulness. I am grateful for the things that you have done. Yes, I'm grateful for the victories continues to sing that quietly, we want to take a moment really quickly to invite somebody into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Here's an amazing thing about God, is that God keeps us before we recognize that we're being kept. And so if you're here today and you're not in a relationship with Jesus Christ, God's been keeping you to give you a chance to make this decision to get connected today. And so we want to invite you to come. We want to invite you to come, connect your life with God, with the life-giving power that's found in relationship with one who's lived, who's walked, who's been where we've been, experienced the emotions of humanity, did it right, and died for our sins. If that's you today, we invite you to